March 24th, 2022, and I will call to order this official meeting of the Deschutes County Planning Commission. Our first item was going to be the approval of minutes from February 24th and March 10th, but we will postpone this item until the next meeting as we don't yet have those minutes to review. So then we will move to our next item, which is public comment. So right now we'll ask for any public comment about items not on the agenda because we're having a public hearing shortly. And so items related to the work plan will be during that time. But if there's any other public comment, now is the time for that.
I'm sorry, I don't know if we're on the agenda or not, our comments.
Are they related with the work plan?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we'll do those very soon. Any other public comments? Okay. Okay, great. So without further ado, we'll move to the public hearing. First, before we open the public hearing, understand that staff has a presentation to offer, so I'll turn it over to Peter Gutowski.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Planning Commission. For the record, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. And thank you. I have a PowerPoint presentation that provides an overview of the work plan and the public hearing process. And so I will, there's about 20 slides that I will go through efficiently. And again, just to confirm, Trevor, our production manager, there's no one participating remotely.
Currently no attendance.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, let's see if we're working. Perfect. I have two slides that I won't go through in great detail that were prepared in the event we had anybody who was participating remotely. So in the event, as I go through this PowerPoint, if Trevor alerts us that somebody is all of a sudden participating remotely, we can come back to this. But this was really just to integrate remote participation in a way that was seamless and complemented those that are here in attendance. So there were two slides, and I'll just go through this. But one of the things that I will acknowledge that the chair mentioned is that staff's providing this presentation. After this presentation, there's an opportunity for the Planning Commission to engage staff with any questions. And then we would turn it over to the chair to open the public hearing for any comments on the work plan. So this is just an overview for those that may be unfamiliar, but the Planning Commission is recognized in Deschutes County as our Citizen Involvement Advisory Committee. They are appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and there are 7 members on our commission. They have 4-year terms, and to the greatest degree possible, the Planning Commission has geographic composition to reflect the diversity and the different places that we have in our county that covers 3,000 square miles. And this is just an image of our county, and I'm highlighting the area that's really underscoring the authority and jurisdiction of not only the Planning Commission, but of Deschutes County and our land use authority. If you factor in federal land and some state lands, the rest of Deschutes County, about 20%, is subject to our jurisdiction. And so this is just an opportunity to highlight that both in a map and in a table. So again, as I mentioned, I'm going to provide an overview of our work plan. There's an opportunity for Planning Commission questions. The hearing will be opened, and I was a little presumptuous, but of course it's to the discretion of the Planning Commission. In the past, they've kept the record open the written record open for a week for people to provide additional comments or feedback in writing, and then at their subsequent meeting, the Planning Commission in the past has deliberated and made recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners. To the extent that that happens this evening, and it's totally to the Commission's discretion, the deliberations and the recommendation would occur at their next meeting on April 14th. So here's our work plan. There's copies here if anyone wants one. There's the link for online for anybody who's interested in getting a PDF version of it. As I've mentioned in the past, many of the planning commissioners are certainly aware of this since they've been reviewing work plans for several years, but it's informed by the Board of County Commissioners, their own goals and objectives. There are changes in state law. We just came out of a short session in the legislature, and while there wasn't anything really significant, typically in the regular session, which is in the odd-numbered years, there's often changes to state law that need to be incorporated into our work plan that affect land use. We have grants and funding sources. The one right now pertains to funding for the Historic Landmarks Commission that allows us to address historic preservation. And we also received, the Planning Commission and ultimately the Board of County Commissioners received public comments. And on this note, I should point out that it was emailed to me this afternoon, late this afternoon. I printed out hard copies on the dais. There's also an electronic version at your email accounts. Central Oregon Land Watch provided a 3-page letter addressing the work plan and some of their priorities. So that's available for you, available for the Planning Commission. I have one extra copy if anybody here in the audience is interested in looking at that. And then invariably, we often have more projects than we can actually undertake year to year. And so quite often there are carryover projects. One example is Dark Skies. 2 years ago, Dark Skies was a discussion topic. It elevated last fiscal year. And staff has, with the Planning Commission and with the panel, has begun discussing a Dark Skies program and looking at our lighting ordinance. So that's just an example of a carryover project, and it's still quite active. So process, the Planning Commission had a work session at their last meeting, a public hearing tonight. I'm anticipating that they'll make a recommendation next month in April. And then in May, the Historic Landmarks Commission will have an opportunity to talk about historic preservation opportunities that they'd like us to focus on in the next fiscal year. And then the Board of County Commissioners will have a hearing in May. So just a snapshot of what we've experienced recently in the Community Development Department. Of course, we're coming out of the pandemic, and this is the second meeting with the Planning Commission where masks are not being worn, or the mask mandate is no longer in effect. So it's a very exciting time for staff, for the general public, to kind of feel like we're getting back to normal. And this is affecting our operations as well. We are experiencing some fiscal and operational challenges relating to staff turnover. There's just due to the retention and recruitment challenges stemming from, I'll call it I've heard it called the Great Resignation or the Great Reassessment. I kind of like the last one. The Great Reassessment has impacted our operations. We've lost seasoned planners, building inspectors, plans examiners, code compliance specialists, our permit techs, and that's, from a fiscal standpoint, it's impacting us because we're having to do a lot more training, and it's leading to certain inefficiencies, which transitions to our operational challenges of just maintaining our productivity as the fastest growing county in the state, and high permitting volumes. We're just transitioning to a much younger staff that just a couple years ago we had far more experience. So we're transitioning to bringing newer staff up to speed and getting them to understand roles and responsibilities and our various obligations. So that's noted in our work plan. We're owning that and trying to be very transparent. Some significant opportunities. I won't read all of this. It's noted in the work plan, but there are some very noteworthy long-range planning projects, which tend to get a lot of attention in the work plan. Dealing with our comprehensive plan update, we're in the process of hiring a consultant to execute community conversations throughout Deschutes County over an 18-month period. We're updating the Tumalo Community Plan. We're going to be addressing opportunities for Sisters Country Trails. There's a rural accessory dwelling unit, some legislation that actually just got patched in the short session. So there's opportunities to allow rural accessory dwelling units through some code amendments that will occur later this fall. And there's an opportunity to update one of our wildlife inventories pertaining to mule deer. And that's just a snapshot. There's many other projects, but those are some of the more dynamic and far-reaching projects that we've seen in quite some time. So again, some business, budget, and operational issues. We are, trying to meet our business demands and plan for our future, looking at our resources and our revenue. I've mentioned staff turnover. There are and those significant demands for training and educating new colleagues regarding our various responsibilities. This third bullet here, I think, is noteworthy. Approximately 63% of our staff have 5 years or less experience, and I would dare say close to half, maybe that's not true. I would say well over 25% have been with CDD for less than a year. So we have seen some major turnover. But as we come out of COVID and the pandemic, our business operations are, I dare say, returning to normal. Where we have the building we administer the building program for the cities of La Pine and Sisters. We have permit techs at Sisters City Hall, at La Pine City Hall, and again, to provide excellent customer service. We're very excited. Some of the long-range planning projects that I just outlined, we hope to get back into the community and have in-person community conversations, in addition to remote opportunities, which are very convenient for many. But that's very exciting as we look ahead in this next fiscal year. We want to meet our performance measures. Admittedly, we're not at the moment, but we have performance measures. We have goals that we're tracking on a monthly basis. Other noteworthy projects, to the extent that we can tackle them in rural Deschutes County, the Board of County Commissioners is very interested and committed to addressing our housing challenges and looking at other rural strategies in relationship to economic development. And then there's collaboration with our cities as all four of them continue to grow and experience significant demands. So the work plan, this is just a highlight of the table of contents. It's a little over 30 pages that highlights all of our four divisions. And also we have a yearly recap that I'm really proud of. It documents what we've tackled, especially in planning over the last calendar year. And you'll even see that there's we have a citizen involvement update that we do, which is an appendix, and it highlights the various meetings that the Planning Commission had over the last year. And while it may not seem, it probably feels like a blur, and you probably have a hard time remembering what we chatted about just a few months ago, but this Planning Commission tackled a number of issues and continues to do so on a yearly basis. So we've recapped the Planning Commission's meetings and what they touched, and we did the same for the Historic Landmarks Commission. Okay, quickly, some highlights. Again, we're sustaining high levels of customer service during a pandemic with significant staffing challenges, trying to provide some hybrid work opportunities for our colleagues who can work remotely. Very proud of the work that our team has done. We had record numbers of land use applications and building permits over the last year. We continue to incorporate new technology and processes throughout our organization. You see this in the building division, where they can go out in the field and go through their inspections, and on their phones they have apps that link to our a statewide permitting program, and they can update inspections in real time. It interfaces with our permit techs here to the extent that they need other assistance. So we have opportunities to incorporate drones for certain inspections that are hard to get to, hard to climb. And so just one example of how CDD embraces technology to provide the best customer service possible. We continue to coordinate with state and other county staff to promote online e-permitting. Starting April 4th, all permits which will be residential now, will be required to be submitted electronically. That doesn't mean that someone who's unfamiliar with e-permitting, maybe has poor internet access, can't come in and get direct customer service, but we're really pushing the ability to submit online. And right now, we get about 60% approximately of our permits online, and our goal is to get that much higher. I mentioned the performance measures. We're one of the few departments that I'm aware of that has performance measures as it pertains to the timeline for issuing land use permits, building permits, single-family home permits, site evaluations for septic system, authorization permits, if there's an addition that could be impacting a septic system. These are two graphs. One shows that we're meeting our performance measures. The other one shows that we're not. But if we don't have goals, if we don't have performance measures, then how do we adapt? How do we engage our community and ultimately our elected officials to respectfully either look to more staffing to try to meet those goals or adjust those goals based on some of the realities that we're facing? So this is just an example, but you'll see several performance measures and a link to our performance measures in the work plan itself. So just a year in review, this Planning Commission also was involved in many of these amendments. I'm not going to read these verbatim, but they range from amending our codes to address guest ranches and subdivision design amendments to establishing a new zone on the western flank of Bend, which is called the West Side Transect Zone, which now requires rural development to be clustered and address both wildfire mitigation and wildlife habitat at the same time. So I mentioned the land use applications that we've processed over the last calendar year. It was a significant increase, as it's shown there, from 2020, just over 25%. Very excited. In 2021, we initiated a request for proposal for a comprehensive plan update for consulting services. We got 3 outstanding proposals, and we're currently finalizing the preferred consultant contract. So I expect, if not next month, in the month of May, Will Groves, our planning manager, will bring the Planning Commission up to speed, and we'll be kicking off a very robust community engagement process throughout the county to start taking feedback about how to address growth and development over the next 20 years. So very exciting opportunity there. And the same thing, it took us quite a long time to finalize a grant with the Oregon Department of Transportation. They provided what's called a Transportation Growth Management Grant. That's been signed, and we are just similar to the comprehensive plan update in just about probably 4 to 8 weeks time period. We are going to be kicking off robust engagement in the Tumalo community to update the Tumalo community plan, and I already mentioned separately there'll be a focus on trail opportunities in Sisters Country. So very exciting projects that we're excited to undertake. And then the last bullet there, as I transitioned, was we always coordinate with our 4 cities as they have their own growth management challenges and opportunities, and we have a responsibility from a regional standpoint to engage them. So our draft work plan, planning priorities, I basically already articulated what many of them are, from the comp plan update to our transportation growth management grant to rural accessory dwelling units. There are other items. Our transportation system plan is also going to be updated this next fiscal year. That the road department is leading that effort. The transportation system plan is an element of our comprehensive plan, so it has to get formally incorporated in the comprehensive plan and acknowledged, and that identifies new road classifications, funding sources through capital improvement planning. So very excited to highlight that one as well. There are some other projects that I've talked about that I'll let you skim through that are noted in the plan. I'm mindful that people are probably getting hungry to provide their testimony. This is just some of the items that we will be coordinating with our cities. The city of Bend is going to be amending its UGB to bring in an affordable for a pilot project addressing affordable housing. I anticipate that this will come to the planning. This is an applicant-initiated amendment, this won't go to the planning commission, it's quasi judicial, but it'll eventually go to the Board of County Commissioners. There's opportunities to amend Ben's Airport Master Plan. The city of Lapine is growing. There's opportunities to coordinate with our property and facilities manager to address an area called the Newberry Neighborhood to help ensure that that planning process is meeting everyone's goals. And then coordinating with the city of Redmond, I'll call out this project. There's great interest. There's some significant funding through the legislature. Several $1 million went towards a project that would establish a regional emergency training facility near the Redmond Airport for all kind of EMS providers in the region as a training center. It also ties into Redmond, is known for, in the event that there's a Cascadia event, that's considered a, what would you call it, a staging ground for addressing those that are displaced from such an event. So it's a very exciting opportunity. It's in its infancy, but it could lead to an urban growth boundary and for the city of Redmond and an annexation of property. Anyway, some housing strategies, again, knowing of the challenges that we have in our region in terms of providing a range of housing types for our community, workforce, and affordable housing wise. So one of those is rural accessory dwelling units, which is Senate Bill 391. There's other opportunities to clean up our code to overturn a very restrictive conventional housing combining zone. So we hope to tackle some of those provisions. I know the board is very interested in other opportunities as it pertains to rural housing and our homelessness challenge. CDD has been involved in some of those conversations, most recently last summer. The other piece that's worth noting is our rural communities of Tumalo and Terrebonne are going through a process of establishing sewer feasibility studies to bring sewer into those communities. And both of those areas have real challenges for on-site wastewater systems. Terrebonne's going through a second phase and is getting closer to determine if that community is willing to support a sanitary authority. There's currently in Tumalo, they're, I think, very close to hiring a consultant. So more to come with that, but obviously for a Tumalo sewer feasibility study will be a topic of discussion during the Tumalo Community Plan. And then there's a list of zoning text amendments that are on our list. Many of these are carrying over from last year, or I should say from this year. One of them is potentially the Dark Skies Ordinance or Dark Skies Program, but there are other amendments that just address opportunities to provide greater clarity in our code. The last one, the sign code, needs to be consistent with federal law in terms of First Amendment rights. Let's see. So to date, this is my public comment. To date, we've received 2 comments. I mentioned Central Oregon Land Watch today provided a letter, but in your packet, there was a correspondence from a resident that is respectfully asking that the Planning Commission consider amendments to Deschutes County Code that would preclude any new destination resorts from occurring in Deschutes County. I suspect this topic will certainly be one of discussion during the comprehensive plan update, but nonetheless, a citizen wanted to elevate their concerns about destination resorts. And so that correspondence, again, is in your packet. Okay, thank you for letting me give you a 15-minute overview of the work plan, some of the operational challenges and opportunities that we're experiencing in our community development department. Madam Chair, I turn it back over to you to the extent that you or the commission may have any questions, but thank you for that opportunity.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Peter before we move on to opening the public hearing?
I do.
Yes, Vice Chair Altman.
Thank you. Could you explain what it means to repeal the conventional housing combining zone?
Sure. The conventional housing combining zone was adopted in the early 1990s, and it essentially in this very exclusive area between Bend and Redmond and Sisters. There's a specific area that precludes manufactured homes. And given the challenges that we've been experiencing of workforce housing, and I also think a heightened recognition of the Fair Housing Act, staff has identified that as an amendment to repeal for the reasons that I've just identified. It's a very exclusive designation. In the early 90s, there was a segment of the community that compelled the Board of County Commissioners ultimately to adopt a sub-area that precluded any kind of prefabricated or manufactured homes in this specific area.
Thank you.
I have one other thing that I forgot to mention. I have a sticky note here. Just to bring it to your attention, this week, the Board of County Commissioners is interested in having Deschutes County participate as a cooperating agency for sage grouse conservation. And so the Bureau of Land Management is going through a process consistent with the National Environmental Policy Act to consider amending some of their resource management plans to ensure that they are adequately addressing sage grouse, which is a candidate species under the Endangered Species Act. As a local government, we have the ability and the invitation to be a cooperating agency to participate in those discussions. Many of the planning commissioners know that over the last 2 years, we were a cooperating agency with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as they were developing the Deschutes Basin Habitat Conservation Plan as it pertained to the Oregon spotted frog. So I don't think that's going to be a significant set of responsibilities, but nonetheless, I anticipate that the Board of County Commissioners is going to want us to participate in those conversations, which will probably kick off later this summer. So just another item on our work plan that will be reflected in the work plan likely after the Planning Commission makes its recommendation. That'll be a new work task that we note in the plan under natural resources.
That'll be interesting. That sounds good. That sounds like an interesting issue, Peter.
Are there other questions for Peter?
I've got a couple, but I can wait.
I think now's a good time, yeah.
Okay, just quick, just brief questions for you, Peter, too. So I looked at the performance measures in our packet. Thanks for including those. And I don't see. I mean, I'm new here, but I don't see any real, flashing red alarm there or anything like that. But as you stated, in some cases we're exceeding measures. In some cases we're maybe not quite meeting the measures. And as you know, there's two ways to look at that, I guess, with performance measures. And the one is to look at the performance, and I know you guys are already, but the other is to look at the measures and to revisit them. And I was just curious, in a nutshell, I mean, what's the process for reevaluating the measures and whether they're realistic or not?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Hovkamp. It's an excellent question. We ultimately would be engaging our Board of County Commissioners. This year, we have used our performance measures, and we are primarily a fee-dependent department. We don't rely on the general fund. And so given the revenues that I've highlighted, our department is quite robust financially. And so we've used the performance measures, our inability to meet those measures throughout the year to engage the Board of County Commissioners to support adding new staff.
Okay.
So for the now, we're hopeful that as we bring on new staff and we train them, that in the next, presuming the land use volume and the building permit volume stays relatively stable and doesn't spike, that we can get back in line with those performance measures. But to the extent, as you noted, that we were not meeting them, then we'd want to have the conversations with our stakeholders, Central Oregon Builders Association and others, letting them know, here are the reasons why we're not meeting them, and we meet with them monthly, and are very transparent in how we're meeting our certain performance measures. And in the event that those need to be changed, we would own it and have a conversation with the Board of share it with the Planning Commission and have a conversation with the board.
Thank you for that. Great answer. And then, just last quick question, about the consultant for the comp plan update and RFP. I don't know if this is appropriate to ask, but in a quick nutshell, what's the process for consultant selection, and without, delineating criteria and so forth, what are we looking for?
So we had a request for proposal that we released in early November. It was, we promoted it far and wide in the state, nationally, and so it was open for 6 weeks. We were looking for a consultant team. I am very proud of I had a colleague who was in the office I was going to point to, but I'm very proud of our team and our long-range planning team. They are exceptional, but we wanted to make sure as we look out 20 years, and we don't have necessarily, we're not involved in updating comprehensive plans on a regular basis. And so we felt, and my predecessor is now the county administrator, Nick Lelak, and I felt at the time we were looking at the comprehensive plan, and this planning commission will recall that we initially thought we'd kick off the RFP last summer. And for staffing reasons and whatnot, it slipped to the fall. But we felt like, we owe it to ourselves to look at making sure that we have the best team available. Consultants do this for a living. And given the fact that as we look out 20 years, we're expecting over 100,000 people our population's going to increase by 100,000 people. Most of them will be in cities. That we wanted to make sure that we were going to utilize the best and the brightest, and the board was supportive of allocating significant resources to bring on a consultant. So that was kind of the mindset, and we, in terms of how do we engage the community, both remotely, in person, using the best engagement strategies possible. So where we are now, given the size of the contract, which will be, well over $100,000. That's an amount that requires the Board of County Commissioners' formal signature, formal authorization. So where we are at the moment is we literally, 2 days ago, we got their scope of work for the preferred we interviewed 3 consultants, selected 1.
Okay.
And we are looking at their fees, their costs, what they're delivering, how they're utilizing county staff, and how it fits into a community engagement calendar. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I mean, to the extent that you care to, candidly, what do you look for? What qualifications? I mean, what does the board look at? Is it experience in Oregon, experience with high growth counties? What are we hoping for in our consultant?
And thank you for that second bite at the apple. We were looking ultimately for someone who had Oregon experience, or certainly with large jurisdictions, that understands the statewide planning goals. I will say that it is very rare for a county to amend their comprehensive plan, but we're different. That's Deschutes County. That's what separates us. Cities amend their comprehensive plans regularly because state law requires it. They have to make sure that they have an updated comprehensive plan to address their housing and employment needs. Counties are different, but nonetheless, Deschutes County has a history of regularly updating its comprehensive plan. The last one we did was 10 years ago. So we were looking for consultants that knew our region, that had a dynamic team, a team that had representation in the region, and was very familiar with the issues that we are facing. And so we got 3 highly qualified consultants that demonstrated a superb understanding of how to update comprehensive plans with large jurisdictions, that understood Central Oregon, that had a diverse team of not only planners, but natural resource specialists and transportation specialists. So the one that separated had a package that really brought that expertise and knowledge of Central Oregon and a track record of working well with the local government and the staff to deliver projects like ours.
Okay, thank you. And one more, if you'll indulge me, just quickly, sorry. But that brings to mind, is there, Peter, and this is my ignorance, but is there, at the end of the process, is there after adoption, is there a state role? Does it like go up for acknowledgement or anything like that, or is there not? And
There is, in our case, unlike city comprehensive plans, that if they, let's say it leads to an urban growth boundary amendment, those have to be acknowledged by the Land Conservation and Development Commission. In our case, it doesn't require state acknowledgement. Now, I'm hopeful that we can have a comprehensive plan that reflects all the diversity of opinions and values and recognizes how all of those values can come together and be packaged constructively and looking forward. And if that happens, then once the board, 18, 24 months from now, once the board adopts that comprehensive plan, then we'll be in a position to come back to the planning. We would literally be right here, think 2 years from now, and we'd be like, we've got the comp plan adopted, we've got some implementation priorities which is actually a deliverable of the consultant, and we would have a public process where the public and the planning commission would inform staff of which projects do you want to tackle next year. To the extent that there's any division about the way the comprehensive plan is adopted, if someone's feels aggrieved with goals and policies, it could be appealed, and the Land Use Board of Appeals would rectify that.
thanks very much.
And I was just going to add, Commissioner Hofkamp, for the consultants, there were a couple of the planning commissioners as well as planning staff that reviewed their VTAs and kind of weighted them on a 1 to 10 over a number of different items. And then we turned that back in so that input was given from multiple people, and those numbers could then be averaged.
And I'm very appreciative, Commissioner Williams, for you to acknowledge that we had a diverse stakeholder group, just as Commissioner Williams noted, that weighed the three proposals, and then after that process was finished, then staff with a smaller subgroup, Commissioner Karras was a part of that, then interviewed the three consulting firms, and one, in our opinion, separated from the other two.
Great, thanks.
I just want to say thank you for those questions, because I think it's important for us to all and everyone who's here to kind of understand the context of the comprehensive plan and kind of the context of this work plan and where it fits in with this big project we're going to undertake that's hopefully going to shift, kind of help us think in terms of where are we going proactively rather than only just responding to issues that come up whenever they come up. So I think it's good that we're talking about that. Also, we have to think about, as we hear everyone's testimony and eventually move into deliberations, we need to think about which of these projects will just be folded into the comprehensive plan versus which projects will need to be separate, distinct entities of their own. So thank you. Okay, other questions or comments before we move into the opening the public hearing? Okay, great. So I will go ahead and officially open the public hearing. Let's see, check in briefly with Trevor. Has anyone joined the Zoom call who may want to give public testimony? No. Okay, just checking. All right, so great. Who would like, first of all, are there any members of the public who wish to give public testimony on the work plan? Excellent. Okay, so I think if you can each come up one by one, and state your name and where you live for the record, that would be helpful. And whoever would like to go first.
Either of the microphones on those tables is fine. My name is Mel Mills, 16265 Bear Lane, Ben 97707. I want to thank you for this opportunity to address my concerns that relate to where we will expend community development resources during the coming year. I have owned property in Deschutes River Recreation Home Sites Unit 6 for over 25 years. It is one of the many communities in South Deschutes County that was created in the mid-1960s by taking a ranch and subdividing it into mostly half-acre lots and selling the lots through TV advertising in a large population area such as Los Angeles. Our subdivision is blessed with many acres of wetland, which we own. But there is much more that in the 1960s were perceived as buildable and thus sold into private ownership. Our subdivision is classified as an extreme fire hazard zone. The CCNRs that went with these lots were written in 1965 before terms such as wetland, recreational vehicle, wildfire, solid waste, chemical toilets, the web, and vacation rentals were even thought of. The hurdle to change the CCNRs makes them improbable to ever change to keep current to today's society. That's why I'm here. We depend on the county rules and regulations to maintain our community's quality of life and livability. While Deschutes County has many laws to protect the many wetland areas, sanitation, and the fireproofing of our neighborhoods, the enforcement is then very difficult, mainly because they are not defined well enough or are in conflict with other government agencies. I'm asking that planning resources be applied to better define the laws and how best to resolve their application. Rather than using some examples of the more than 25 lots that I'm speaking to, I think the best thing is offer my time to go with representatives of the county and/or this commission and cover the 7 miles of road in our subdivision and look at the issues directly. All are in a different state of analysis. Some camp trailers had code enforcement action 2 decades ago, and little has changed if you compare the enforcement picture to today's look. These are units with a kitchen and a bathroom. Some remain vacant lots with the scars of illegal assault on the wetlands. Some have solid waste left over from a successful intervention from code enforcement. One wetland intervention beginning in 2012 at one point was to have annual inspections by code enforcement is now the equivalent of a fenced junkyard in a wetland. What most of these lots have in common is a disregard of wetland preservation, increased fire risk in an extreme fire zone, and negative impact on groundwater quality. There are shallow wells throughout the subdivision. Here are a few of the areas that I would like to focus on for your perusal. I've found that if we try to solve world hunger, we probably aren't going to solve it. So this is just some specifics that I think will assist in this. Deschutes County has zero tolerance on disturbing wetland areas. This is not enforced due to ambiguity with state laws and lack of definition of what a wetland is and by whom is the authority. Any rare attempt to enforce becomes reactive rather than proactive before the damage occurs. I suggest that any lot thought to have wetland be required to demonstrate that it is not before an owner can proceed with any action that would destroy it. No good definition exists for solid weight on a lot when it comes to a recreational vehicle. There are all kinds of rules that you must comply with if you want to put a legal structure on your property. Someone can put a recreational vehicle or unpermitted structure on a vacant lot for decades with no driveway permit, landscape management plan, sanitary review, or permit. An unattended recreational vehicle is a fire hazard waiting to happen. It has a battery or electrical system for spark creation and propane fuel to accelerate the fire. I suggest that any recreational vehicle will become solid waste and removed if it is not currently titled and licensed and is not removed from the property for at least 30 consecutive days in a calendar year, thus exhibiting the temporary nature of the unit. A recent concept is the advent of renting a vacant lot for camping use. In areas of low-value lots such as ours, this would create an unmanaged and unpermitted RV park. A reasonable definition of a commercial business is all non-residential facilities engaged in business or commerce, whether for profit or nonprofit, or publicly or privately owned. These type commercial operations should not be allowed in our R10 zones or within established subdivisions. And I might add that in the next I will talk about the number of lots that the county has taken through foreclosure. And I've heard that they're thinking of renting these lots for basically animals. And so I don't know if that's true or not. But fourth, over the course of decades, Deschutes County has taken ownership of over 40 lots that were of no value to the owners due to wetland or septic issues. I admire those people who gave up these properties and their investments to the greater good of protecting those irreplaceable lands. Unfortunately, with the increase in value, even for marginal properties, the county has resorted to selling the lots and exposing them to the risks in which the people gave up the marginal lot in the first place. I propose that the county work with state and county entities to return these properties as recreational lands to the Property Owners Association. In summary, I encourage you to have the county planning department work with the POAs of these marginalized communities to coordinate enforcement that maintains the livability that we know as Central Oregon. Any questions?
Does anyone have any questions for clarification? So not a time for debate, but clarification.
You mentioned something about 30 days with the RVs.
Yes.
And if you would just repeat that, because I am under the impression, I'm the South County representative,
Okay.
that an RV is not supposed to be on a lot that's not buildable in active use for more than 30 days. That was the impression I've been under as long as I've lived here, even though in our neighborhood we do have the same problem.
Okay, this is the problem with the 30 days on, 30 days off, okay? They can leave the RV there. The county reads it as is somebody in the RV, okay? The other issue with the 30 days and 30 days on is it's not a 30-day consecutive stay. So in a 60-day period, I could stay every weekend and still be within the 30 days, the way they determine it. But this is a problem in ours, and I know some of the other, we have probably a larger problem because of the wetland, and so it's not only just a septic issue that you can't do something with these lots, it's basically that it's a wetland lot.
And is that's off Silver Fox, is that?
Yeah, Silver Fox
that's
is
what I
one of the main roads, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner or Vice Chair Alderman?
I just have a question for you regarding wetlands. Have you reached out to the DEQ?
Well, this is, DEQ mainly is with sanitation. Okay, so the Division of State Lands is the entity that typically you would work with on wetlands, and the federal agency would be the Corps of Engineers. The problem with what we see down there is, and especially the realtor groups, they will take and get a form that is put out by DSL, which basically somebody like maybe in Salem on a desk will look and say, oh, our maps say that there might be wetland on that property. So yes, there may be wetland on that property, and send it back, and then the state has a rule that you can do 50 yards of fill. That's if you take 25 yards out and refill it with 25 yards of gravel, for example, that's the 50 yards, okay? It's very hard to judge that if you don't know, are you in wetland to start with or not? Okay, and so what we've seen is they'll start off with maybe removal of less than 50 yards, but then over time they will increase it, extend the driveway or whatever, and so you have kind of wetland creep. But, I prefer the Deschutes County zero tolerance. If it's indicated wetland on dial, then we should require them basically to demonstrate that they are not damaging wetland or going into the wetlands, or if they are, that, there's some type of review process.
So, any other questions? Or? I have one then. So your suggestion is to recommend a project that looks more closely at coordinating enforcement of things that are already there to protect the wetlands, or is it two parts? One, clarify the language so that it's more clear how this is defined, and then coordinate enforcement strategies.
Well, there's probably potentially a little bit of both. I'm not an expert in that area. But I think what we're looking for is when the county has zero wetland, okay, let's apply it to all, okay, consistently. And let's, have a methodology where it's punitive enough that people aren't going to go in and destroy wetland and then seek forgiveness, okay? And that's a lot of what I see out there today. That answer your question?
It does, yeah. And thank you very much.
Okay.
It's clear that you've done a lot of work reaching out to different places, trying to find different strategies. So you're very experienced in this, and so it's really good that you're bringing it up.
Yeah, and I'd love to meet with somebody that's going to be involved with trying to resolve this. And you can't totally understand it till you go out there and you drive it and you see it. Some of it with the fire reduction fuels, it's opened up a lot where there's stuff that you see now that you wasn't that noticeable before. And we have, privies, all kinds of things out there that are going on that shouldn't be.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much.
And again, if you could also state your name and address, that would be helpful.
My name is Nadine Ruth, 54641 Silver Fox Drive, Sun River 97707. I'm also president of the Property Owners Association in DRRH 6. So we, as you know, are in the Three Rivers area between Sun River proper and Lapine, and the Deschutes River runs through our neighborhood. I tried to eliminate, so I didn't be repetitive with Mel, our concerned citizen, who was very helpful. But the community was platted in the early 60s. The topography is such that 2/3 of the lots are completely or partially in wetlands or wooded wetlands, rendering them unbuildable. And on many, normal fire reduction is disallowed. Additionally, the configuration of 7.5 miles of roads serving some 465 lots has one standard entry and evacuation exit point and one substandard exit through Lapine State Park. Our concerns as a board are in regard to our extreme fire danger designation and the many factors that can contribute to this designation, as well as ways to improve our situation. We have been advised by the Lapine Fire Chief on more than one occasion, Mike Supkis, it's not a question of if a fire will go through our neighborhood, it's a question of when. So we're not slacking. To improve our situation, we've entered the process of becoming a fire-wise community. Our owners have made great strides, and we're awaiting news on a grant, which I believe is $50,000. The grant money, should we receive it, will be used to reimburse private property owners for fuel reduction and creating defensible space. We've reserved a huge chunk of our HOA funds for fuel reduction on our common areas. However, state and county law and code has made this a labyrinthine task. The county has been helpful by both considering what can be done in wooded wetlands and at our request, forestalling the sale of some of the foreclosed wetland properties the county owns in the development. But we are asking for more rigorous enforcement of some existing codes and even considering more stringent codes with a view to fire danger. Our CC&Rs do not allow the use of an RV as a residence. However, we, meaning the board, have taken a yearly vote to allow trailers on lots on a 30-day on, 30-day off provision as per the county code. But these lots are used, but how these lots are used with an RV on it is tougher to regulate. They have become unpermitted abodes, which I'm changing now to rural accessible dwelling unit, because I love that. But they're not treated that way by code. We're hoping the county will see them as in need of driveway permits and setbacks the same as is required for building a home. Some of these lots have electricity but no water, as a well cannot be installed in wetland property. An electrical permit, we believe, should go hand in hand with on-site water. This would enhance both firefighting and evacuation efforts. They need proper setbacks. They need enough room to create defensible space. And this is rarely possible on these wetland lots. How many of the owners are dumping their waste in a hole in the ground and contaminating the river and wetlands? We don't know. They need sanitation reviews. This isn't a task the PO board can oversee. It must come from the county. Recreational vehicles and an assortment of non-permitted structures and dwelling units are long-term and current hazard and deserve our concern as well as the county. Some wetland properties have a small usable area. At least one such lot was granted a driveway and electrical permit, and the owners set it up on a VRBO type of website as a campsite that you could rent, as Mel mentioned. A campsite, electricity, no water, a fire pit, all in the hands of a traveler who may or may not be aware of our fire danger and the protocols to us equals disaster. We have no system of hydrants. Our roads and properties are governed only by our rather antiquated CC&Rs. We need and depend on the county, though some codes are not clearly defined or enforced. Areas such as our community are in need of a usable, cross-referenced, enforceable, and enforced plans to protect our homes and lives. Most of the lots causing high fire risk are environmentally protected, yet wetlands are cleared before any action is taken to protect them. Permits for landscape pads, driveways, building setbacks, and conditional use permits could address the damage before it transpires. Our HOA has been actively chasing reported substandard, non-permitted septic tanks, which are buried units or trenches with gravel overlay under non-permitted structures and trailers. Where well exists, well houses are sometimes used for toilets and showers. The unrestricted and uncontrolled use of these can have negative consequences on often shallow wells in the area, not to mention several years ago the nitrate issue in South County. More attention needs to be paid to septic problems from such uncontrolled usage. We're also critical habitat for the Oregon spotted frog right behind my house. Landscape management for clearing and monitoring the disposal of waste are crucial to rural areas like ours. To provide a concrete example, we are currently seeking interface on a 30-foot dwelling that was once a vehicle. Now someone lives in it. It has wheels but cannot be licensed as any form of road legal unit. The motor has been replaced with a wood-burning stove with a marginal chimney. The property has been issued a driveway permit but does not have a 20-foot road easement setback for fire trucks. The owner has cut into the wooded wetlands and continues to live in what is essentially a home without permits. There's no septic system, electricity, or source of water on the property, yet somehow is evaded the intent of the codes. We are aware of how stretched the whole of Deschutes County services are. We're asking for codes that address the spread of rural use the last years have seen. The overlap of one section of county code, its interface with state mandates, and the original intent of the existing codes on more urban situation has left areas like ours with more problems than it solves. The threat of fire, the health of our souls, the wildlife, and the river itself depend on action at our level as well as the county's. Thank you for allowing me to present this.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Nadine?
Madam
One
Chair.
question. At the very beginning of your discussion, you were mentioning wetlands and wooded wetlands and the extreme fire designation, but I didn't catch what you said about ladder fuel reduction. You're not allowed to do something on the wetlands, and what was that?
You cannot do fuel reduction.
So you're not allowed to cut the trees?
Correct.
Okay, so you just cannot do the ladder fuel, okay.
I think they're trying to make that work. The county and the state, I know over the years, I've talked to different people about it, and I think they're trying to make it work, whereas before, like,
So that you can at least thin?
it was so complicated, I can't even go into it, what you would have to do this, as far as removing, and then you had to put back, and it was, yeah.
Okay.
The good news is on the 40-plus lots the county owns, they've done a very good job of fire fuel reduction in the last year. So, they've somehow been able to resolve that in themselves.
Commissioner Crawford?
Thank you, Chair. How many lots are we talking about under private ownership in this
There,
subdivision?
I think there's 465 lots, anywhere from half an acre to 5 acres. Some
Okay.
people buy them and combine them into one tax lot.
Okay. Again, how many was that? 500?
465?
465? Of that 465, how many of the lots do you perceive are suffering the issues that you both just discussed?
About 2/3 of the properties in our development are in wetlands or wooded wetlands. Huge chunk.
Madam Chairman?
Yeah,
That's why the county ended up owning them.
Okay.
There's approximately, I believe, Nadine, you can correct me, 150 houses in the subdivision now. They've been adding quite a few, so just about every, buildable lot is getting built out. The county owns 40-some, okay? And then there's, these marginalized lots that are, people pay more than I would pay for them now, just because, but they come in with a thing that they think they can use them. And the problem is that they're wetland or substantially wetland. They will never, most likely they will never be buildable unless they're gonna, lower the standard for wetland. I don't think that's gonna happen. So, and if this subdivision was done today, other than having paved roads, the wetlands would not be sold as private property.
Okay, so I don't think I got my question answered. So how many of the lots have issues that you are talking about? So like RVs parked on them without septic, power, et cetera. How many of those lots are occurring?
I don't know of any lots with an RV that have a septic.
Okay, so,
How many lots total?
right, how many lots have RVs on them?
I know it's more than 25, because I
Okay.
kind of counted before I came here tonight, mentally, you know, the different, the issue is not just how many we have today, but they keep increasing. For example, I used to be able to drive my house to my place, which is about a mile in, okay, and not encounter anything other than an outhouse, okay? You know, now I come in and I encounter multiple lots that have RVs, maybe more than one RV. You know, illegal structures. There's a 800 square foot structure that I would have to get a permit for. It's on questionable wetland. Okay, they pay $100 tax. I pay $1,000 tax on a 600 square foot house that I have out there. So, you know, it's increasing, and there's still more lots that haven't, you know, that people haven't marginalized. Okay.
And one final question. Have you brought these concerns to county staff, and what kind of response did you get?
Yes, we have. They're backlogged. They were very helpful with one in particular where someone was living in what he kept referring to as a tiny house. And it was an outbuilding. There was nothing else on the property. It was an outbuilding. They had an unpermitted septic. The previous owner, who was a relative, evidently put two big tanks in the ground, and they had an electrical permit for a barn. There was no barn there, so they attached that to the side of the shed. So he's in there with an unpermitted septic and unpermitted for a home electricity. The county did help resolve that, and everything's taken care of, and it was sold. And when properties go on the market we have started sending them as a board a letter just advising them, please read the CCNRs, please read the list of fines. We're going to come up with rules and regulations to kind of fine tune some things. So that in particular, like the one that's now on VRBO is a campsite, rent my campsite. Fortunately, they do have a driveway, but other people who come in, and it's heavily wooded, come in on Silver Fox, but there's a big grassy area in the middle. Well, in the summertime, that's brown grass, and they drive in with a couple trucks and trailers. A couple years ago, somebody pulled off 97 with their trailer and their truck, and a fire started just from the heat from the engine. So that's what scares us. So we need the county's help.
Thank you.
Commissioner Swisher.
Could you remind me again what year your homeowners association was developed and when your CCNRs were adopted?
1962 or
65.
65.
65. Yeah, I have some empathy. I'm the vice chair of the Tollgate Homeowners Association, and not quite the issues you're talking about, but some of those, including a small wetland and other things. But I think there's several homeowners associations in the county that were formed in a similar time frame. And again, there may be some issues about how those CCNRs get updated that makes it almost impossible by the voting things and stuff. And there may be legislative needs to occur in order to do that. So that's just a comment, but I wanted to query if this was the same time frame as what I've experienced. So
It would take 75% vote in favor of all property owners.
Right,
And they live all over the country. They inherited it from their great-grandparents.
exactly.
So that's not going to happen. But 2 or 3 years ago, we did redo our bylaws, and they included a fine schedule that that backs up the CCNR. So now we have something to work with. For example, the dwelling I talked about that has the wood-burning stove in it now, and he's not supposed to be in there. He's getting a letter now, and his fine is about $500 a month.
Got it.
He's not going to pay it, but we at least have something to work with, and in most cases, it should be successful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Gutowski.
And I, Madam Chair, may I
Yes,
offer
please.
some comments and some observations and maybe some suggestions. For context, many years in southern Deschutes County, and I would venture to guess for Deschutes River Rec home site number 6, they have high groundwater, really high groundwater. And so there's wetlands, jurisdictional wetlands, which are mapped or not, but there's likely jurisdictional wetlands that are protected under county code. And then there's high groundwater, where the groundwater is less than 2 feet from the surface. So you can't actually site a septic system. You can't have a dwelling, which is one of the factors I suspect why these legal lots, which have some property rights, you can't take all property rights off a property, or else that's going to be a taking. So I think that over the years, the county recognized that for these high groundwater lots, some that have jurisdictional wetlands, that one could utilize an RV within a 60-day period without a permit, or they could go through a temporary use permit.
Can I correct that a bit? Some of these lots, like the ones with the campsite, it's got a little corner that's not in the wetlands.
Right, understood.
The rest of it is,
Yeah, understood. There's some
you can't put it
that
out.
have upland. There's some that are predominantly wetland. There's some that are not in wetlands but have high groundwater. So it's a very ecologically, environmentally sensitive area. But in terms of how the kind of the development pattern that we've seen there, some in the upland area, some have houses, legitimately, right? And for others, they take advantage of the temporary use permit to site an RV outside of wetlands, to the extent that, we look at our wetland inventories, we have them, and to the extent that it's outside that, and you can identify it's upland, and some people two-dimensionally can site an RV consistent with code. What they have acknowledged, so those are just the realities that we have down there. What
I would say though, Peter, the 6-month resident permit that you issue, the county issues, okay, cannot be done, because that is one of the things that the CCNRs prevent, because you have to have a 500 square foot or larger dwelling.
Yeah, I understood. I don't want to be, I just want to give my understanding, not to get in debate, but
Yeah, just to clarify, Peter's got the floor, so let's hear him out, and then I will go back and find out if there's anything else that you guys want to clarify or disagree with or add. But we want to avoid, it's like a debate is not part of the public hearing.
yeah, so thank you. And again, I value their perspectives. So local governments don't enforce CCNRs. That's a private contract, covenant codes and restrictions. So whatever that's built into the homeowners association, that's up to each HOA to determine how they're going to administer and enforce them. One of the challenges that we know is happening, and our interpretation of our code is one cannot, so if you have one of these lots that's outside a wetland area, they can go through a temporary use permit and site an RV for a 6-month and a 12-month period. But they have to demonstrate to us what they're doing with the wastewater, where it's being sited in relationship to our understanding of where the jurisdictional wetlands are. But we are aware that there's these new apps called HipCamp. There's these pressures to use these temporary uses as a campground. And we don't think that that's consistent with our code. Our code doesn't say that explicitly, which gets into interpretation, which I think is one of the suggestions that they're respectfully offering, is the code could even be clearer. But to share with the group, my understanding from our team is that, that's not a lawful use of a temporary use. The moment you start bringing in the public into an RV, RVs aren't designed for guest accommodations for all the reasons that our constituents have acknowledged. The other, and they are right that we've had turnover in code compliance. I would acknowledge to continue to engage with CDD and our code compliance officers. As imperfect as that has been, we have staffed up and just hired 3 new code compliance specialists. The other thing that I will acknowledge that makes it difficult in the terms of, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Chair, is some of these squatters or users of these properties, if that's what we're going to call it, have disabilities, have mental disabilities, and there's an American with Disabilities Act, and that requires local governments to proceed very, very cautiously. You have to under federal law, you have to make a reasonable accommodation. It doesn't mean that they can dispose of wastewater illegally, but those are other factors that are not just in this part of our county, but throughout the county as we deal with our houselessness challenges that we have to reconcile with. So it can take even longer to resolve some of these issues. And I have tremendous sympathy for what these two Deschutes County residents are articulating. Anyway, I turn the floor back on to you, but what I took away is, there's an opportunity to further clarify the code, but I also want to acknowledge that we have, as Commissioner Crawford noted, that we have a staff in place today that I understand is not necessarily delivering as much as you would like, but please continue to engage us. You can file code compliance complaints, and we will process them. I will dare say that we have hundreds and hundreds of code compliance circumstances, but this is one that would rank very high because of public health and safety. So thank you for that.
Thanks for clarifying those things. I would like to hear from both of you or either of you if there are things that you want to clarify now that he's finished.
Well, I'd like to just explain how we got into the temporary. See, none of us knew that existed, okay? And they applied for this permit that came in, and then, once they got that bill, we had a very ineffective POA. Okay, so part of our issues are we've had a very ineffective POA. The last couple of years, Nadine and her other board members have been very proactive in trying to do it, to include new bylaws where we can now fine, okay? So some of the issue is that we need a determination by you that they're violating the law, and we can actually fine where you would have to go to court and a lot of other things, okay? So there actually is some mutual stuff that we can work through. But what happened in this particular case, the POA said, hey, you can't have a resident trailer there 6 months a year. So they turned it into a VRBO, okay? And they used, because 2 miles from us is Lapine State Park, free dump station, free water station, and it's the Range Rover, they got a little upset because they also said free garbage, okay? But, so part of it was convenience. We had the pandemic, people were looking for places. They were renting that place for $95 a night. So, you do the math on it, and it's like, I'll destroy lots of wetland, if I can get $95 a night for a trailer, and I got maybe at most a $20,000 investment. So, and that's why we need basically the definition of commercial. What is commercial? Okay, I know the other VRBO with residences is a much bigger issue in the county. Okay, and but campsites, there isn't a residence, so That's kind of what we're asking is cooperation. And I certainly didn't mean if you interpreted that code enforcement wasn't doing their job or whatever. I just think that in a lot of cases, we don't have a good definition to enforce. And that's what I meant. It's nothing to do with the people. I know that, like, Dan Smith's a very good person. But, you know, it's hard to do your job if you don't have a good guideline.
Thank you. Yeah, that's, it's all coming together. The more, I think, I don't know how everyone else feels, but the more I'm hearing, it's all making sense, so. Nadine, did you want to clarify anything?
I can give you, I'll try and make it really quick example of how complicated it all get. We had someone, we don't go out looking for violations in our neighborhood. If somebody brings it to the board, then we will follow up on it, but we don't drive around looking for stuff. We know they exist. Several years ago, 2 property owners built, they were on the river, and they built fences that went all the way down to the river's edge. Somebody complained, you can't do this. You can't stop the natural flow of migration. Bunnies have to go over, deer have to go over. I sat down, I don't remember the gentleman's name, brought in the information, sat down with him. He already knew what I was coming in for. He already had all these rules and regulations out there, and backed it up that, yes, you cannot do that. You're in violation of this, 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 and this, and this. Presented that to these 2 property owners. They came in and got completely different information. I shouldn't say completely different, but it was in their favor. And so it just, nothing happened. The fences are still there going down to the river. So that's just kind of what we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to give you a consistency between me as a homeowner that has an investment, okay, I have to get technically approval for a fence, okay? Whereas somebody that doesn't have any approval at all, haven't done a landscape management plan or whatever, they can put fences, any kind of fence up they want, and nothing gets done about it, okay? So fences is a difficult topic because some people, what's ugly to one person is okay to another person. What allows wildlife to go through, okay? But at least we ought to apply it consistently, whether you're a homeowner that has investment there or you're a vacant property owner. So then that's kind of where we're asking for this clarification.
Well, I'm clear on the suggestion. Does anyone else need to ask any clarifying questions?
Just thanks.
Commissioner
for the
Hopkamp?
testimony. Yeah, sorry. Thanks for the testimony. It's really, those are really striking examples. I mean, really vivid examples. And I personally really like, and I know you do, those areas in South County and Three Rivers. I think it's beautiful down there, and I appreciate the motivation where you're coming from to try and protect some of the resources down there. So thanks a lot for that testimony.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry.
I'd love to show you around.
Should I leave this with you?
Please,
This is the long version.
I will make it, we will make it available to the planning commission. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So, are there any other public testimony, comments, and none online? Okay, great. So let's see then. I think we have some options to consider here. I know that in the memo it says that we're going to deliberate on the 14th, but we should make this a formal process and a formal decision. So I think if we're going by other public hearings, I believe we have options like continue the hearing to a date certain. We can close the hearing and leave the written record open to a date certain, or we can close the hearing and commence deliberations technically either tonight or on April 14th. But I do want to clarify, I think that it seems we're being asked to give our recommendation to the board on the 14th. So it seems like we might want to consider that in thinking about what motion to make when it comes to closing or not closing the hearing.
I would think we would want to keep it open Because there's possibly people listening in on the phone who might want to give their 2 cents worth, that we would receive that information
Do you want
before the
to,
14th.
do you want to make that into a motion? And also, if you do, include clarify whether you're moving to keep the oral and the written open, or just the written open?
I would move to keep the written open for a week so that we have time to process it once it comes in. If it was oral, would that be like if they left a voicemail?
No, it means that we just wouldn't have more oral testimony on the 14th.
Okay, I would say we move to leave written testimony open for 7 days
And close the oral?
and close the oral.
Okay. So a motion to leave the written open for 1 week, 7 days, and close the oral testimony. Does anyone want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to leave the written record open for 1 week and close the oral record. Is there any debate, or actually, as
Just
the
a
maker of the
clar-
motion,
Just a clarification, we
Yes.
say a week. Is that through next Thursday or next Friday, or what are we talking about?
Thank you.
What do we mean 1 week?
we should say exactly the date.
Right.
Commissioner Williams, do you want to clarify?
And actually, before we actually make the motion, I would just say that, and I'm sure we have the exact same problem in our neighborhood, and we cannot figure out how to.
So we can't deliberate just yet,
okay.
Or debate just yet.
Okay.
We need to amend the motion
I
now.
move that we keep written public input open through March 31st.
Okay, so it's a friendly amendment, so that means if any one of us objects to making the amendment to the motion, then we have to go through a formal process.
Friendly second.
Okay, great. So now it has been moved and seconded that we leave the written record open until March 31st and close the oral record. And that's been seconded. Now, Commissioner Williams, as the maker of the motion, please tell us your thoughts on this.
Commissioner Swisher, he's also mentioned this. Those of us that live in rural areas, and especially over the last few years with homelessness, we don't have teeth in our CC&Rs. We live in really old neighborhoods, and I see multiple RVs that are, they block them out on the bottom to keep heat in, cool in, et cetera. I think if we could have more clear code, it might help some of the HOAs try to start making better steps because we do have numerous fire hazards, health and safety hazards in our neighborhood. But because we are rural, we're not a big or more expensive neighborhoods. We don't have the money as an HOA to do a ton of enforcement. So that's just my thoughts. That a rewrite might be good in addition to some of these codes, clarifications, things like that. A lot of the city folks don't see as much as what we experience in the rural areas.
That makes sense, yeah. So to clarify, is this a comment related to the motion of keeping the record open? And
I thought we were just kind of
We ha-
discussing that still a
so
little.
Yeah, so sorry, I should have outlined the process. So the next step will be seeing if anyone has any objections or comments in favor of what to do with closing the hearing, or specifically the motion to leave the written record open until the 31st and close the oral record. So we're going to talk about that and then vote on it. And then after that, I think we should go to the Planning Commission and staff comments, which is the next time. And then that seems like a really good time to
bet.
process
I
everything.
always forget the steps.
No, it's just, there's a lot of steps, so. Vice Chair Altman,
I
yeah.
think there's some confusion in what we're keeping the record open for. And if you could clarify, this is for, the public hearing is for the work plan. It's not, these people
Yes.
came and made their public comments for things that they would like, which is great. and
Correct.
I think that's
Yes,
great, but
yes,
I
the,
just wanted
the
to
motion for public comment is for the working plan.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good clarification. So that means that anyone who would like to submit a written, in case there's anyone watching or viewing this video later, if anyone would like to submit any written comments about our work plan draft, we're going to be deliberating about that on April 14th. So we'll want to receive your comments anytime between now and the 31st of March. And then we'll be able to take into consideration those things when we figure out what we'd like to recommend to the board. So that's where we are in that process. And so that could be comments related to anything we've heard tonight, or it could be a completely different project or something that you're concerned about that you think the county should be addressing as we go forward. So I think this is a great motion, and I plan to vote for it. Would anyone like to make a comment about the motion before we vote?
Just a question, Madam Chair. So is the Board of County Commissioners looking for input from us on the 14th?
That's what I took away from the memo. And I am inferring that from, I think, I don't have a direct quote from it, but I think it says, oh, here it is. The Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on March 24th and deliberate and make a recommendation to the board on April 14th. So I think we're being asked to. I guess we could decide not to do that, but
We certainly could.
yeah. But I think that's a fair ask, and I'm sure that the county staff and board would like to move forward with the work plan, so.
It appears to me that if we pass this motion, which I am in favor of, that we will not be able to prepare a statement for the Board of County Commissioners on April 14th, because that's the evening that we were meeting on. But I think at that point in time, we could give some good debate to our topic and have some information to the board shortly thereafter, whenever staff could get it put together for us.
So to clarify, you're envisioning if we pass this motion, then we'll have a healthy discussion on the 14th. We'll come up with some good recommendations or information, and then the board will receive that information when the staff has a chance to relay that to them.
That'd be my understanding of what I said.
Yeah, so they may not get the recommendation by the 14th, but we could provide a recommendation on the 14th.
No.
No, okay.
If we're meeting on the evening of the 14th, we are not going to get anything to them on that day.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, so in terms of wording, we could clarify what we want to recommend, and they will get that when they get that.
When staff is available to get it put together.
Yeah.
Does that work for
To be
you?
clear, I'm sorry if I may have been presumptuous to try to identify dates. Staff is not going to schedule a meeting with the Board of County Commissioners until the Planning Commission has made their recommendation. In the event that you find that on April 14th, you want to deliberate and you can make recommendations, great. In the event that you need another meeting to go through and examine the work plan and figure out the various priorities, and it needs to occur on the April 28th, that's fine too. Where staff's not trying to rush the Planning Commission, I was just looking at previous experiences. What has been outlined thus far was kind of a pattern of practice, but by all means, there's a lot to consider, and I want to honor certainly staff wants to honor the Planning Commission process.
Yeah, the only argument I could think of, like I said, I actually plan to vote for the motion, but the only argument I can think of against the motion would be if anyone felt like that we didn't get enough public testimony, or we want to try to recruit more citizens to provide oral testimony for some reason on the 14th. That's the only, like I said, I plan to vote for it, but that's the only thing I could think of that would be against a motion.
They still have a week to
Do written.
give written testimony, and if somebody's trying to recruit more info, they can still do it through the written form.
I agree.
And there also will be, Madam Chair and the Commission, there will also be a second public hearing with the Board of County Commissioners. So to the extent someone is enjoying an extended spring break and they want to participate, they still can. And we'll do a press release to to the extent that the hearing, that's a tentative date there on the screen of Wednesday, May 11th, but that's what we will ensure that there's adequate opportunities to continue to communicate ultimately to the Board of County Commissioners.
That's an excellent point as well. Any other arguments against or in favor of this motion? Okay, great. So just to repeat, the motion that's on the floor here to be voted on is leave the written record open until March 31st and close the oral record. Commissioner Crawford, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Hogamp?
Yes.
Vice Chair Altman?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
And Commissioner Swisher?
Yes.
And then I will vote yes as well. So it has passed unanimously that we will close the oral record and keep the written record open until the 31st of March.
Just to make sure, I'm nitpicking this, but I would say through March 31st, so that.
I was reading that and saying, yeah,
Okay,
End of workday, March 31.
right,
what's that?
End of workday.
End of the
Yeah.
workday.
right.
So do we have to do that all over again, or can we just?
No, we're fine, just clarifying.
Awesome. Okay, good. All right, so now let's go to Planning Commission and staff comments. Let's do staff comments first. Peter, do you have any comments?
I do have a couple. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 3 comments. One, I mentioned, reminded those commissioners that were in eating dinner, but just a friendly reminder to you, Madam Chair, there's a date set for the joint work session with the Board of County Commissioners for June 9th. And there will be dinner served, and I know that the county commission is very interested in, which they do typically annually, interested in engaging the planning commission and hearing your perspectives. I think the timing couldn't be better because both bodies will just have gone through the work plan, offered perspectives. The board, I think, will be, but by then we'll have likely acknowledged the work plan or made any fine-tuning adjustments. And, you know, there's several projects that will likely be just kicking off, some significant projects that I highlighted earlier today. So please mark your calendars down. Wanted to let you know that for some of you, you may remember Nicole Mardell, a planner for us, an associate planner for us. Well, she left our organization, went to the City of Sisters for a couple of years, worked for the Department of Land Conservation and Development for a few months. She has returned. So she is a senior long-range planner. Wednesday was her first day. So we're thrilled to bring her on board, and all of you will be, some of you will be introduced to her for the first time. Many of you will be reintroduced to her. So very excited about her addition. The other piece is, well, actually, why don't, if you would allow Tarek the courtesy, just to, we can prep him just for a Dark Skies update, where that is, and just to let you know that process is still going. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Sure,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Peter. Thanks, commissioners and Chair Kiris. I think the biggest update would be that we've taken the conveyance of support from the Planning Commission on the 24th, supporting both an update to the ordinance generally and then exploring an educational campaign. That's been drafted into a memo right now. We're in kind of final phases of reviewing that, and that'll be presented to the board on Monday, April 4th at this point. So a lot of opportunities for the board to kind of give us direction in terms of next steps. That could be any variety of choices, one being asking for sort of additional public input, sort of like an extension of the panel discussion in February, getting sort of a larger community input in that way. Maybe other folks that, for instance, there was a panelist that wasn't able to attend in the discussion because of a family emergency, so different perspectives like that might be something the board's interested in. There might be more jurisdictional review of some of the key elements of their dark skies ordinances. Could be anywhere from adopting wholesale what we heard in the panel discussion in terms of those recommendations, all the way over to maybe a more prolonged sort of community-based discussion within either the comprehensive plan or some other sort of larger planning initiative. So that's largely where we're at right now. We're conveying that support that was previously detailed by the commission to the Board of County Commissioners right now. So that'll be on April 4th, Monday, April 4th. So if you have any questions, be happy to let you know, but not a lot has happened, I would say, since you've conveyed that support.
Thank you for the update.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Appreciate your dark sky work on the drain.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's awesome. It wasn't a light bulb, but it's light bulb in your eyes, so yeah. Appreciate that.
And thanks
Get
for
the
getting
second
that.
one up for some reason.
Yeah.
So sorry about that one. If there's no further questions, thank you very much, Commissioner.
I don't know if that was Tarek or Peter that forwarded us the dark sky source article, but thank you, that was great.
Yeah, so I guess as just a final point, I spoke with Hannah Merzbach, who was I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, the journalist there, and I thought it was a really well-balanced kind of snapshot of where we're at right now, but also she did a tremendous amount of research just on the actual ordinance and kind of other places. She talked to observatories, she talked to people that I wasn't even able to get a hold of. So I thought it was a really well-researched and well-balanced article. I think it's a good way to frame these next steps. So I'm glad you all got a chance to look at that.
Thanks.
So now we have Planning Commission comments. Can we start with Commissioner Williams, since I'm sorry I had to cut you off?
I don't always understand the order, or I forget it. I thought what they had to say was very valuable, and I know that, we regularly go through code, change different code, and would agree that clarification could help a lot of HOAs. I don't want to say clean up their neighborhoods in a bad way, and yes, some people are having hardships, and this is where they have to live. But if there's a way that we could make it easier for HOAs, it would then help with code compliance complaints maybe decreasing. Maybe help take a load off of the county.
That's a good point. Excellent. I guess I'll just go this way then. Commissioner Swisher.
I would like to just comment on the fact that almost 8 years now of finishing the work, I've had 2 topics that I got the most personal input on from my constituents or people lived in the community or elsewhere in the county. Number one, far and away, and the magnitude of over 100 personal connects, was marijuana at that point. Number 2 has been dark skies in the neighborhood of 50 at that point. The rest of the topics over time, there might be 4 or 5 or maybe as many as 10. Somebody that knows we're talking about something goes out of their way to talk to me about it and that kind of thing. But I find it interesting. Marijuana you can predict, but dark skies, I would not have predicted that many people, not only from Sisters Country, but few, because I know several people in the county have gone out of their way to either email or phone me to say, important topic, I'm glad to see you guys are looking at it, etc. So anyway, I just wanted to make that comment.
That's a really good comment. Yeah. Okay, Vice Chair Altman. Okay. I maybe should have asked these earlier during the work, after the staff presentation, but I was interested to hear what everyone had to say. But one comment I have is that it would be great to see, and you may just be able to say this right now, but which of the projects that are on the draft are grant supported?
Let's see, 2. There's one is certified local government grant for helping fund the Historic Landmarks Commission. The Landmarks Commission meets quarterly. It's not a lot of funding. It's approximately $12,000 over an 18-month period. The second one would be the Transportation Growth Management Grant. I think that amount is approximately $75,000, our contributions in kind. And so, of course, that's funding the Tumalo Community Plan and the Sister Country Trails. The consultant contract for the comp plan update, while not a grant, represents a significant amount, and I will certainly can communicate that to you once it's finalized, but it is a very large request, and we have funding for it in our existing budget and what we're in the preliminary budget stages for next fiscal year, and we have a sizable amount to, when it's combined, to fund this consultant. So while not a grant-funded project, it certainly represents a significant contribution from the general fund.
Got it. And then the wildlife inventory is not grant funded?
It is not.
Okay.
It was part of the initial analysis,
Yeah.
the involvement with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, bringing in Wendy Wente, the consultant. That was funded by a Department of Land Conservation Development Technical Assistant Grant, but that grant ended in basically June of 2021.
Okay.
So how we're implementing that or planning to implement it is entirely in-house. And that, there should be an update. The month of May is going to be, I anticipate several, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but there will be several updates, on the topics that I highlighted this evening, to get the Planning Commission re-engaged, and that will be one of them. I anticipate we'll be pretty close to kicking off the formal amendment at some point in May.
Okay, and then, while Senate Bill 762 and getting up to date with that, are there two distinct projects with wildfire mitigation and develop a work plan to amend the comprehensive plan, county code requiring defensible space and fire resistant? Is it just that one project is both?
Yeah, it's a good question, Madam Chair. So there's a lot of elements, and if I may, I'll just take a few seconds to remind the Planning Commission of what's coming. At the end of June, the Department of Forestry is going to complete their wildfire hazard mapping, and it's going to include a wildland-urban interface. And within that wildland-urban interface, it's going to have designations, low to extreme. Deschutes County has I have every expectation that all of Deschutes County, I don't know this, but I have an expectation, given our fire regime, our climate, that Deschutes County is likely going to be into a high to extreme category, its entire county. Regardless, those classifications that are high to extreme are then subject to Senate Bill 762. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? In October, the Department of Consumer and Business, the Department of Consumer and Business Division will release amendments to the state building code that pertain to fire hardening for new development, single-family dwellings, additions, for single-family dwellings, accessory structures, and additions. Those rules will be released in October, the end of October, but they can't come into effect at the earliest until April 1st of 2023. At the end of December, the state fire marshal will be releasing the defensible space standards for those properties that are in high to extreme. So what the work plan is trying to acknowledge is there's going to be a number, we will need to amend our comprehensive plan, we'll likely need to amend our zoning code, and given the elements, the importance of education and outreach, it seemed best to kind of fold it under what do we call it, a work program. Because it's going to have significant implications to the rural county. But it will lead to amendments. The other piece that's coming up that's worth mentioning, in October, the Department of Land Conservation and Development is asked to make recommendations to the statewide land use program and how it's implemented by local governments as it pertains to wildfire mitigation. So DLCD will be looking at, are there necessary changes, potentially over and beyond what I've just highlighted, those major thresholds. They may have other, they may identify other issues that local governments need to address, evacuation routes, staging, things of that sort, and others, what it means to live in a community that is potentially designated hazardous stream, what kind of additional restrictions should be contemplated. So there's a lot to unpack. Much of it is I think, going to be mandated on us, and we can use in that, for those requirements that are, those rules that directly apply, we can use those requirements, and, fold them in a public process, starting with the Planning Commission, to begin education. So, I can imagine some point next year, we'll figure out how to have maybe several, open work sessions in different areas of our community, maybe have one hearing in Bend, which of course now can be viewed remotely. But I think there's an educational opportunity in light of this state rulemaking that is coming from the state and applying to local governments, that this Planning Commission can have an integral role addressing and figuring out the best ways to update our codes and our comprehensive plans. So it's kind of my imperfect justification for why that provision in our work plan is written the way it is.
I appreciate the context, as I know I say that a lot, but I really do, hearing what the whole timeline and how these different pieces of it are going to be happening at various times. I think it's, as much as possible, getting reminded of that is probably good. Just the timeline part. And if we do have that as a project, when we have it as a project, it would be good to know, we're in, here's where we are on the timeline, and here are the other things that are going to be happening, just so that we don't forget where we are.
And that's why, spoiler alert, that we're going to give you we have every expectation that the Department of Forestry is going to release their rules for the wildfire hazard map and the ratings for the wildland-urban interface in May. They're not just going to adopt it on one day. They're going to release it so the public can digest it. I anticipate Kyle Collins giving this Planning Commission and the board, and Ed Keith, to the extent we need Ed Keith here too. The Planning Commission will receive an update on Senate Bill 762 in May. You'll receive an update on Senate Bill 762 in September, before the Consumer and the Department of Consumer and Business Division release their fire hardening rules. And the same will happen in November when we get the State Fire Marshal's Defensible Space Center. So you'll get updates as soon as we are aware of them at your next meeting. And then once all of those are you need all to be released to figure out how does staff begin integrating it into a work plan that will eventually update the comprehensive plan and potentially the zoning code and other codes for that matter. So, we will not blindside you. We want to give you early updates on all of our high-profile projects as they're evolving. So I think it's really going to start. You're going to have some extensive updates, I think, monthly starting in May.
Commissioner Williams?
To comment on 762, the three heads of subdivisions in our one neighborhood, we had our first meeting last week with a representative of ODF. Again, being a rural area, a lot of people are going to take this more defensively than positively. So he is going to do a mailer from ODF, because people won't necessarily open up the mail from our association, but you might from the forestry, and he's going to host an event at the local library for us to get us ahead of schedule on 762, maybe get us introduced to Firewise, because he says in your neighborhood it's going to happen, you're going to have to be compliant, and why don't we start now so that by the time it's, we're already ahead of the game. So, we just reached out to ODF and they said, we know we need to do something. Can you help us out? And they said, absolutely, we would totally do that for you.
And it's just to follow up on Commissioner Williams' remarks, there is an, I mean, the Senate Bill 762 is all-encompassing. It deals with smoke, it deals with on-the-ground mitigation, it deals with land use, building, defensible space, et cetera. One of the provisions of the code, when the wildland-urban interface is identified and the risk classifications are released, there's an appeal process. So residents can, if they so choose, can try to challenge their classification. So that's baked into Senate Bill 762. And I suspect many will across the state because if you are in the high to extreme classifications, then the rest of the bill that pertains to development and land use applies.
Okay, thanks for answering all my questions.
Of course.
Commissioner Hopkamp, any comments or?
Just two questions. In regards to just sort of thinking about the quantity or, I don't know, maybe surprising lack of quantity of public input in regards to this hearing. I should know this and eventually I will, but what kind of noticing do we send out in regards to something like this item?
We did a press release, so we have a public information officer that released an announcement of the work plan approximately 2 weeks before the public hearing, so to get the biggest bang for the buck. So it's up to the media to determine if they're going to react. R.L. Garrigas interviewed me on the radio, but interestingly, the bulletin, other media members did not respond. Just a follow-up on that, to the fact that there wasn't tremendous input, I will say that those that follow land use in Deschutes County, if I had to make an educated guess, the number of, I think when you look, for example, if you look at Central Oregon Land Watch's letter, and they are an active organization that is very keen on our land use, they identified the wildlife inventory, they identified the comprehensive plan update, they identified, the importance of addressing agricultural lands. They asked a clarifying question about some amendment that we want, an amendment we want for non-farm dwellings, which is basically just keeping our code in alignment with state law. It's really just a kind of a clerical code amendment. It's nothing significant, but I use them as an example. It's not every year where we're doing those types of projects, plus the Tumalo Community Plan update, plus continue our conversations with Dark Skies, plus Sisters Country, it's just, plus Senate Bill 762, plus, rural, so it's a long-winded way of saying, I think silence is almost a majority of there's, I dare say, broad support for the work that is identified in this plan because it is so robust and so meaningful. And it can it's going to transcend our community, hopefully in positive ways as we go forward. So that's my hypothesis, of why.
So press release goes to major outlets. It's on the website.
Yeah, it's on our internet. Exactly, it's on our website. I emailed. Well, that's the other thing I did. You guys, as you guys were blind. You guys received an email from me in early March announcing the work plan. I sent that to every agency, organization, engaged individual that I could think of. And Nick did the same thing, a year ago. We would always just get together and be like, okay, here's our list. Who are we missing? We'd be like, oh, there's, this person's really engaged, and without any kind of value to it. It's like, so I did that. And so,
Yep.
So, again, that's why I'm thinking, well, maybe the reason why that we didn't see a lot of written testimony or participation online is because when they looked at the work plan specifically related to long-range planning, there was a lot to get behind.
Yep. That's fair enough. And then lastly, just anticipating our next meeting on April 14th. And I want to be fair to you that staff still kind of wants to maybe think about how it comes back to us, but to the extent that you know it now, I liked the approach from last year with the separation of items into sort of non-discretionary because of grants or timelines or ongoing versus where there was some discretion as far as our recommendation and so forth. So is it the plan then that we'll have that same sort of categorization and be able to look at, especially, discretionary ones, and if that's the case, then, I don't know, maybe this is a question for my colleagues as much as for you, but other than sort of, that issue really kind of appeals to me, how should I evaluate those discretionary items as far as which ones, that I would advocate for elevating versus others? I don't know. What do you think, Peter?
I included in your packet again, which also is in your work session packet, how the Planning Commission addressed our current work plan.
Right.
And I thought that was really effective.
Yeah.
The one thing that, and I finesse this, I say this delicately because I'm not trying to, I want the Planning Commission to feel like you are making your own objective recommendations. The one thing that I mentioned during dinner, and I certainly acknowledged in the presentation, is our staffing limitations. It has been a tumultuous year, and we have retention and recruitment challenges. And so one of the things I mentioned 2 weeks ago, and I'll offer again, is we can package, these projects under different categories. But one of the categories you may want to add to yourself is, in the event that we are staff limited, which projects do you want us to undertake? And, one's grant funded, the TGM grant, one's getting huge infusion of general fund support, the comp plan update. And so what's the third project? What's the fourth big project? And then just go down the line. That's a worst case scenario in the event that we didn't have the long range planning bandwidth that we're forecasted to have. That's one exercise that I think could be worthwhile to offer your perspective. And then, the rest can be just organized, in terms of discretionary and regional coordination and all of that, just like we did last year.
I like that. Yeah, that helps me anyway, Peter, honestly, to think about the ones that just make total sense because of the funding stream or their coordination with the incorporated area and their processes that we kind of have to do on a routine basis, versus the ones where we actually maybe have some measure of discretion.
Right.
But I would just ask my colleagues, when you stepped through this last year, what kinds of things, just the discretionary items, how did you think about them?
So for me, I think that recommendations that all of the projects, that's just not very useful because of course they're all important. They wouldn't even be there if they weren't important to somebody. So it's hard to pick. For some work plans, it might be easy to say, oh, this is the one that really speaks to me, that I think this is the future of Deschutes County, and I don't want Deschutes County without this particular activity going on, so this is super important, we got to do this now. But sometimes it's like they all are, maybe, or even if it's not all, many of them are really important. So then I think you could also think like which ones are more urgent, like what do we have to do now versus next year? Or for me, I know I'm going to be thinking about what could be a part of the comprehensive plan update, since that one's going to be on my top priority list. But I think there's like a number of ways you could kind of, sort of think about urgency, importance, how much it's important to you, or how much it's important to people that you're here to represent and speak for, or what's best for the greater good, or other people.
I'll take a stab at it. Really complex question that before me when I think about this, and that is, first of all, historically, from a couple of years before to last year, what kind of things were bubbling up then? Are we seeing the same kinds of things? there are things that didn't really get done or didn't get addressed then that maybe we should think about now. So that's one component of it. The second, people seem to not be shy in talking to me in terms of, because of being a local school superintendent at one point and a variety of things. So I have a lot of people that feel free to pick up the phone and talk to me, and so I weigh in kind of what I'm hearing about that and work plan and that kind of thing. So I weigh that, and then I apply some of my own value system and thinking and that type of thing. So in that, there's not a strict weighting or anything, but basically I'm trying to consider all of those points of view and what's before us, and then I turn to the experts, Peter and his staff and those kinds of things, and listen in terms of what do they think they can really get to and what's really important and what are they hearing. And then through all of that, I come up with a dartboard and say, it's kind of what I weigh number one, I guess, or two or three or four. But it's very complex, and I don't have a real weighting system or that kind of thing. It's just, trying to bring all that together.
Any advice?
Gut. I really think that's kind of, what's important to the clientele that I'm representing, and having been a resident for a long time, where do I want to see my county go? So that's what it is to me. Can I change the subject?
Yes, please. I was
Okay.
going to ask for your comments next.
Okay. So I'm going to go back, hopefully, to Peter here, a couple questions on our presentation. So it was indicated that the county owns 40 lots in the subdivision. Were those acquired by default of paying taxes or foreclosure or?
Good question, Commissioner Crawford. My expectation would be that many of these areas have high groundwater. Many of these areas may have jurisdictional wetlands, they're undevelopable, and people stop paying property taxes, so they were acquired through foreclosure.
Okay. And so the county has no intent to do anything with those properties other than own them?
I can follow up with Christy Bollinger, our property and facilities manager, our properties manager. In some cases, there has been a recognition to hold them because of their ecological value. At times there's been a push from residents to respectfully ask that the county create a park. There are other areas where they're not jurisdictional wetlands, but they may just have high groundwater. So it's kind of forested property with just a really high water table. And the choice has been made, and the properties are sold with a complete understanding of the limitations that are on the property. I mean, CDD provides information, the road department, et cetera. So there are instances where the properties are sold, and as articulated, people are buying them. They're not sold. They reflect the appraised value, which in this case, these properties, because of the shallow water table, cannot qualify for a septic system. So you can't have a dwelling, and this is probably more than they wanted to hear, but you can have an accessory structure, but the accessory structure, when there's no dwelling, it can't function like a dwelling. Like, it can't have windows. It's really meant to be, a storage unit. So there are cases where that has happened. But of course, you hear about the slippery slope and whatnot. But to your question, it's through foreclosure. There are instances where properties are sold, surplus properties are sold, and other instances where they're retained by the county.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Great.
Oh, one more thing. It's just really good to be here with all you folks.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so unless there's any, yes, Commissioner Williams? Yeah.
I don't know if everyone read all the way through the packet, but the very last page, I don't know if his name was Tim or Jim, but he had his public comment written about precluding any more destination resorts. And I think that is a hot button.
And
Wasn't
that, go ahead.
automatic, Peter? I feel like you said, or Nick said that at a meeting last year, that automatically once the city hit a certain.
That is still open for debate. There's a recent, there was a Thornburg, so Thornburg has an application that's actually been acknowledged through the courts, and it pertains to golf courses and water features. During that journey up through the courts, went all the way up to the Oregon Supreme Court, their arguments were made that the resort was essentially invalid because Bend had hit 100,000. And under state law, when you hit 100,000, when there's 100,000 people in an urban growth boundary, destination resorts are prohibited within 24 air miles. That was the argument that was made. It was rejected at the Land Use Board of Appeals. It was affirmed without opinion at the Court of Appeals. And the argument that the Land Use Board of Appeals made is that only that provision of state law pertains to when the destination resort eligibility map was first adopted and acknowledged. And so once it was adopted and acknowledged, whatever happens afterwards doesn't poison the map at all. Now, I think that's going to get relitigated. They're going to try to re-argue that over the course of these other handful of Thornburg applications that are going up through the courts. Regardless, there's still a concern by Mr. Lipscomb that Deschutes County could go even further, though, and respectfully amend its I'm translating, should consider updating its comprehensive plan to preclude new destination resorts. And I think there are many themes that this planning commission is going to hear during the comp plan update. This will be one of them as well. Not to say that it can't be its own work plan or work project, but to the extent that the planning commission found that this was a topic that is well suited for the comprehensive plan update, I was planning for it, just given the level of interest and strong opinions that the county's experiencing from the Thornburg Resort.
But did that address your question, though? I mean, as far as.
Yes, it sounds like.
Any new ones? I mean, any new ones beyond, not Thornburg that was acknowledged decades ago, but any new ones, aren't they precluded by that 100,000?
Not based on the Land Use Board of Appeals decision, because that criterion only applies when the destination resort eligibility map was when it was acknowledged. It was last acknowledged in 2011. So Bend hadn't hit 100,000 yet, so the map controls from that point forward.
So does the map ever, does the map ever change?
The map can be amended no more frequently than once every 30 months. It's only been amended once in 2010. So it could be amended if there was, support to update it accordingly. So
That's one route
that would be one way of updating the map would be to update the map to only identify those areas that are destination resorts today. Those would be the ones that would show eligibility. The rest of the area that shows eligibility would be removed.
That makes sense. So that's one route, and the other route is the comprehensive plan update.
That would happen through a comprehensive.
Okay,
You'd
either
have to
way.
amend the comprehensive plan and a combining zone to make that happen.
That makes sense. So last time, 2010, was when the comp
Deschutes
plan,
County updated the map, yes.
as part of its comprehensive plan update.
It came out of the comprehensive plan update. It was a huge priority by the Board of County Commissioners. There were 3 properties that were added to the map. Several properties were removed. Other properties chose to stay in. It was quite the process. The map at one point, when it was first adopted in 1992, there were 112,000 acres identified for eligibility. When we updated it, there were 3 large properties that were added. One was the DSL land, that's the matter of so much controversy next to Thornburg. The other was Caldera Springs, the area that became Caldera Springs, the destination where there's Sun River. And then there was another property near Caldera Springs that called Belveron that was added, but there's nothing has happened there. But again, the Land Use Board of Appeals found that the last time the map was updated, because Ben wasn't at 100,000, that the map is still valid. That eligibility criteria still controls, regardless of the fact that Bend is hit over 100,000.
Did you, Commissioner Ullman, did you have a comment?
I think it was all addressed.
Okay, Commissioner Swisher.
I have one last addition. I had talked about marijuana, dark skies, but a third emerging one continues to bubble up, Tollgate Homeowners Association, Sisters Country. That's the overnight lodging, vacation rental issues, and I'm hearing lots about that from a lot of corners, and it runs about 4 to 1, 4 against to every one comment about don't stop me from doing that, 4 saying, why don't you guys do something about this? So anyway, that's also an emerging topic that is a big deal, in Sisters Country at least.
Belveron, if it's where I believe it is, it surrounds my neighborhood, and they gave up, and they just got it rezoned to F2, and they're just selling them as like large 40-acre parcels.
Yeah, for
They tried
temporary
doing a
lots.
zip line and all that, and yeah, it's just, they gave up. Amen. One of it backed up to my house, so.
I will tell you, I could tell you offline more about that property.
I would be interested, because I saw the resale values, and got all the letters from the county with all of that going on, and so I would love to hear about that offline.
Okay, so any other comments? Okay, it's 7:46 and I will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
So, Peter,